brought over from the board action on
Do we
the,
normally make public comment at the beginning?
no, not normally, but that's addressed in here, so that's a change that's going to be made.
Okay,
But we can ask if there's,
because Dolce filled out a form here. Did you want to speak before?
I did, because I wanted to talk about one of those policies.
Yes, okay,
So do I, if we're allowed,
okay, yes.
which would be a Sunshine Act good thing to do.
Gotcha.
The policy I wanted to talk on is the one about the participation of extracurricular activities and inter-school athletic sports. While I understand the need to recoup the money from, that we're paying extra for these students that are going to cyber and charter schools, whatever, it comes across as a penalty for those families. They've already paid taxes, and now we're going to charge them $750 per sports season.
So that's this new board, I think you're preaching to the choir. I think a majority of us are in your same camp. I don't think that
Okay.
charter school students should be penalized or charged or any of that.
Okay.
Because I feel, as with you, charter schools are public schools, and we've all been taxed, and people have paid their taxes, and I don't want students to decide not to participate because, you know, maybe their family can't pay that $750 or
Well,
something.
and
No.
that $750 is quite possibly the taxes they've already paid.
Mhm.
And if you've got somebody that does wrestling, which is a winter sport, and then you've got somebody that's on track and field, that's $1,500.
can I say something here? The
Yes.
families were not going to be charged.
Okay, so.
The cyber schools were going to be charged. It
Okay,
was
so
never
they-
going to be, it was never going to be a charge to the parents or the family.
Okay, because the way that that reads is that there was going to be a fee assessed.
Yes, but it was going to be charged to the cyber charter schools.
So,
And how does that work if the
What if the
charter
cyber-
school says no?
yeah, what if they don't want to
Well,
pay?
that was where we left it
Yeah.
when we had the discussion in the previous policy meeting.
Okay,
That's where, what if the cyber school says no, what do we do then?
right.
And I personally don't think it should be changed, I think it should be left as is,
Yeah.
that they are still part of this district, even though they're not per se,
Right.
they still live within the
They're
district.
still
And
paying
they-
school taxes.
Right, and they should have all the benefits.
Yeah.
Right, and I know that we don't have that many students, but you've got students that are,
Well,
In
it
the
went for
cyber
band,
school-
it goes for band, it goes for all that stuff. It's
Exactly.
all the
but the
extracurriculars.
$750.
But it was never gonna be the family that was charged. I just wanna clear that up.
Okay,
That
good,
was never the case.
good, okay. Yeah, that was my thing, I just didn't want,
But I think we're all in the same camp
Okay.
with this new board. So
Okay.
I don't think that this 750 is going to move.
And it wasn't just it was 750 and then
there's the
stuff on
accrued
top.
cost, the calculated cost of uniforms and transportation.
And the coaches' fees
Coaches'
and,
fees
yes.
and stipends, like there's a list of things, but then on top of that, immediately at the beginning of the
Yeah.
season, it was $750. So my concern was that it's a penalty, and the way that it reads is
Right.
these people are going to be immediately assessed this fee.
No, it was never
So-
gonna be,
Okay, good.
No, and we're with you on this. I mean, I live in Minnesota where charter schools existed longer than in any other state. And charter schools, they're considered actually a part of the public school system, and there isn't sort of this weird you're stealing our money kind of thing.
Right.
They work together a lot more closely, and the charter schools have actually sort of become like specialty schools. You know, one school, for example, they teach all of the classes in Chinese.
Yeah.
You know, and then they work together with the public schools, and any kid who wants to have his classes in Chinese, they go there. So,
Right.
I would hope to see a future for that in Pennsylvania, but that's another discussion. But creating a fee between the schools is not the path forward to making the schools work together better.
Right. Okay.
Oh, right, Dave, you had a comment.
So procedurally, you're gonna public comment on all the ones you want the first reading on from us first before you make your recommendation. That's what we're doing at this point? For the ones that are on the agenda?
I don't know, Barb, this is,
Well-
well, it's not my committee, I should probably be sitting down there.
Okay, so this is what I can tell
Well, the
you.
first question is, who is the chairperson of the committee?
Well, that was going to be one of my questions. We need to put in to some of the policies that there will be a chair set.
Well, let's totally dial back. So the main reason why I'm here, and it's actually not on the agenda, and that's because Janine wasn't copied on our emails, is that the board is discussing eliminating these committees and replacing them with a workshop. So what had happened was, Mr. Corby had told me that at other, Jack had told me that at other school districts, a model he had seen was that they had one committee day, and that all the board members would be present. And then there were 3 committees, right? And then only 3 board members were a member of each committee. And then the committees would rotate, but then all the board members would be there to hear all the discussion and all the topics discussed. And then when you got to the board meeting, people weren't saying, well, what happened in that committee meeting, da-da-da, and wasting time. And I thought it was a great idea, but then I took it a step further, because to me it seemed a little disingenuous to have the entire board present, but then to say only 3 of us are on this committee and now 3 are on that committee. It just seemed a little silly and like red tape, and I proposed, what if we eliminate all the committees, add a second board meeting, just like you were saying, Jack, like instead of committee night, we call it workshop night, and then we can target those specific items, like the elementary center occupancy permit, or, like fixing the boilers, and then we can pick out all the things that really need to be discussed and information needs to be presented. It's of course a public meeting and everyone can be there, and then at the end, the board members vote to put it on the agenda, like the real board agenda. And so to me, I don't want us to waste time now talking about who's the chair of the committee, because in my opinion, I'm hoping, and we got a lot of positive response by email from board members, that they're supportive of this workshop.
Well, there's probably only a couple of committees you can't do that with, like personnel
Sure.
and
And
negotiating.
the wellness that they had today.
And negotiating committee.
And
That's
Yeah, well,
gonna be
this isn't even
separate,
really
sure.
our committee, we just send a
Right.
person to someone else's committee, but personnel will always have to be like an executive session anyway,
Right,
so
right.
that'll probably just piggyback.
And same with negotiation.
Correct, those can't be public meetings, so, but all these other ones, buildings and grounds and academics and da-da-da-da, I'm favoring the idea of just getting rid of this structure and having a workshop.
And if we do that, what I'd like to suggest, can we, maybe the one thing that we would take action on would be paying the bills. And that way they would be, prior to being paid, they would be approved by the board. Which would eliminate the 609, 687 issues.
Sure.
I mean, something to look at and think about. We don't have to, decide anything, even like, with the concerns that I heard in the academic meeting, with what if we find people and we need to hire these teachers and the second marking period.
Yeah, and Jack had said that also to me in a conversation he and I had, maybe on the phone or something like that. He said if we had an emergency situation where, this teacher applied and we want to hire her right now and not wait 2 weeks, then we could piggyback that on if we do a public announcement that there will be some business at the meeting. So you're correct, we can
Right, and
use those meetings to do emergency business.
And like what we heard tonight with the middle school, if
Yeah.
there are applicants for those positions, We need to hire them before the semester starts. We
Correct.
can have a special meeting to do that.
Yeah, and then so, big picture for the audience, the reason I'm bringing this up at this meeting is because in order to change the committee structure, we need to change some of our policies, and that's why mainly I'm here tonight. Because I would like to propose these policy changes and then, and then have that appear on the January 24th meeting so we could vote on it, and then we could have our very first workshop in February. And then now, since this is a new concept, I'll ask for public comment.
I know that they had done the work sessions before in this district. It was before I moved here, so I didn't partake in those. But I think that, I'm probably wrong in this, but I think 2015 was when they did the work sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that. After that, it was, they said they were work sessions, but I don't know, because I didn't attend some of those, so I don't know if they were actual committees or if they called it a work session. But I know they had done it in
Committee
the
of the
past.
whole, I think, is what they call it.
I was out of town also then, but I thought those workshops were focused on building and construction.
It was.
Okay,
It
it
was
wasn't
specifically-
everything, it was just
Right.
that.
But they had done something similar as to talking about that stuff during that time, as
Yeah.
opposed to all these different committees.
Great. I think what Jack's comment to me was that he felt as though our regular board meetings were getting inefficient and sort of distracted, and we were mixing, like 95% of the things that we vote on are just like, yes, 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 and then boom, we hit this thing, and everybody gets distracted for an hour, and why not pull those things out and have them
At a workshop meeting.
considered in a workshop meeting, and then the entire board is there instead of just 2 or 3 people, so.
Right, so the entire board hears the whole discussion. And certainly, the community could comment and ask questions.
Yeah. So, Brian, you've been quite quiet. What's your thought on this concept?
I honestly don't know how I feel about it. I didn't get an opportunity to give the committees a try and to kind of see how they worked, so I don't have anything to kind of judge it against to say one way would be better than the other way.
Yeah, I would tell you from my experience, just to, use the example of the academics committee that just happened. It feels very informational, where the staff, they're telling us what's happening, but there isn't any real brainstorming or deliberation happening. And then I know also in the past, there's been sort of, Dave is here, there's been that accusation that the committees have been used in sort of a way to sort of hide information from the community. And the hope would be that if there's a workshop and the entire board is there, and hopefully we'll have better public participation, that maybe there'll be more deliberation, more back and forth. So that's my opinion on it. I feel like the committees right now have kind of stagnated and they don't feel very alive.
This is the amount of people that show up to committee meetings. It doesn't matter what committee it is. This
Actually,
is it.
There's probably 2 or 3 more than usual.
Well, there is that. It's very small. You don't have a lot of.
Because I'm not sitting out.
participating.
But hang on, that was as a result of the way that the community was treated by the board in the past. They were signed, there's no reason to show up if you're not gonna be
We're trying to
heard.
change that. So if we do a
Right.
workshop meeting and all the things that would be before the committees would be presented, you just have to realize that that meeting with finance, say, academic affairs is always a long meeting. Usually building and grounds is 15, 20 minutes. Same with athletics. Sometimes they're longer, but usually not.
To me, if it's just informational, to me, the workshop should really just be focused on something that needs to be discussed, something that needs to be considered, maybe changed. If it's just the staff talking to us, you know, about something that they're planning to do, and they don't need permission, and the board doesn't really have a thought on it, I mean, I don't see the point in having that in the meeting. Like, you know, basically it's a big, long description of we're doing our job, you know, and the board has nothing to say about it. So why not just target these really important things that actually require discussion or manipulation or development, and maybe leave the other blah blah out of it?
But just to be clear, we can't take any official action at this workshop, is that correct?
You can.
Well, it'd have to be advertised as
It's
such.
not advertised 24 hours.
If it was advertised as such that it would be this type of meeting, yes.
Okay. But we
It's like calling a special meeting, as long as you've taken the legal procedures.
Let's say we had to approve hiring of teachers. Then it would be, yes, we would advertise it as there would be, you know,
Action.
yes, motions made and,
I think the only sort of official action would be a motion to have it appear on the board agenda. That would be the sort of.
unless it was an emergency situation that had to be approved right away.
Correct. And then we'll all be there, and it would be possible to do that, but it would have to be an actual emergency.
And you can close that meeting and open another one that was duly advertised.
That's true. That's true. Any other public thought?
How often would you have these workshops?
I was thinking once a month, on a Monday night, 2 weeks prior to the board meeting. Because then if we had sort of a concept that everyone was in agreement of, but that concept needed development by the staff, then people would have 2 weeks to get the paperwork put together to be able to present it to the board at the board meeting.
So there wouldn't be academic policy, building and grounds, whatever, it would, or finance, it would be, let's say, next Monday would be the workshop, and then 2 weeks later is the board meeting.
Correct.
So 2 meetings a month, essentially, for the school district.
Correct.
Yes.
And-
Unless something came up and needed whatever.
Exactly.
Well, for the most part, you're going to have finance at every single workshop. You're gonna have a
Right.
policy,
Yeah.
because we have to go through these policies every month.
You're
So
Right, but
those
you
two
don't
things are
have-
always gonna be,
4 meetings a month.
right,
Exactly.
right. It would condense them into one.
Okay.
And if you're on, as Barb said, if you're on one of those shorter committees, you're coming off 15 minutes and
Right.
having to go home. So if you can condense them all, it's, the substance is there.
Right, like Kyle does building and grounds and athletics. He would, whatever he would have to present, he would present, you know, right, and then he could leave if he wanted to.
Yeah. And
We
even-
have to stay.
And even if he needed to present, you know, if there was nothing that really needed deliberation, Kyle could miss the meeting altogether. He could just go home.
Right, but what I would like from, like, for athletics and building and grounds, what I would like from Kyle is, like I said, those meetings are short anyway, but if there's issues with the buildings, I think, and they're usually presented
Yeah.
at those meetings, so he could even have just a statement, this is what's happening.
Yep.
Like, it would be nice to know if HT Lions is, when they're gonna get that stuff done with the boilers, when that'll be completed, et cetera.
Mhm.
I think we need to know that, but I mean, he doesn't even have to be here for that, it can just be something that's read.
Sure, yeah, he could give us a statement,
Right,
an update. Yep.
and then if there's any other questions, we can certainly do it through email.
Right, so I'm asking the policy committee if you guys would work on the relevant policies to make this alteration.
Well, I will look at it, I got your message, booted up the computer and printed out the emails, but I haven't had time to look at them.
That's fine, I mean, I had emailed Jeff Sultanic to make sure that there were no legal issues with this, and committees are not, it does not come out of the school code. It's totally discretionary, and that's how different school districts are run, and they all do it differently. So it's all locally,
It's local law.
it's local law in our policy, and we have the right to alter it as we see fit. And then I also asked him about, the concept of community members, being like on the committees, because that had come up before. And he said that in his experience, it has never been successfully done. He said that if we have community members like Dashe who are super interested, that, we should be certain to make them feel invited and to come to the meetings and to be part of the deliberation, but to give them a specific title or to, make them a committee or to give them a vote, he said that opens up, legal issues.
Okay,
Because they're not elected officials like we are.
right.
So, makes sense to consolidate the efforts. Most businesses would do the same thing. And since a lot of the committees have been informational based from the employees coming to the board, telling them what's going on, it would be very wise if you're going to go down that path to also make sure that they are submitting their reports in advance of those meetings, so you have time to review them, and then at the same time publishing them online, so they'd have time to review them as well. So if they're going to present at the meeting, rather than presenting at the meeting, present in advance of the meeting, whatever mechanism in the web that you want to use, we all use Zoom, they should be able to have access to that and
Well,
present
part of the
prior to the
problem-
meeting, so you're making the meeting more of a productive session of these high
Part of
priority
the
meetings.
problem with this particular meeting is it came right after the vacation. So there wasn't time to get the agenda out a few days earlier. It came out yesterday. And I went through a lot, I spent hours yesterday going through the policies and looking at things.
There were also items in legal review that we were waiting on.
Right,
That's-
and,
Yeah, as soon as, and then at one point I said that we just have to put it out.
yeah, right, I get you. But, and a lot of that has to do with the reorganization, all the changes that have been made. So hopefully that'll be, I know this is supposed to be the first reading of these policies, and most of them I don't have an issue with. 903 is a big deal. 903 is a big deal because of the First Amendment issues and how that's going to be worded.
So 903 we received from Foxborough.
Right, and I haven't had a chance to read it,
Okay.
because I literally downloaded and brought it with me. and here it
That's
is.
actually what I was waiting on before I can upload this. And
Right.
at that point, I said, we'll just put it out and have everybody just put in their thoughts and then have it legal reviewed, but she might be coming back today with her recommendation, so.
Right, and that had a lot to do with the fact that there was a holiday.
Right.
Normally that wouldn't occur.
Right.
As far as 011, I didn't print out the new policy. I noticed it was very much truncated. It's one page less.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the wording in the old one is superfluous, but some of the wording I would like to keep. I noticed that a lot of things were moved from one section to another.
So this is recommended by PSBA based on the governance, the governance standards. And they issue that, and when you adopt this policy, there's actually like a poster that you sign and is posted in the boardroom. This is what was part of your new member orientation. When you
Okay.
went over policies. I don't know if you remember, there was the page that had like all the colors.
Yeah, I do
Yes.
remember that, but the old 011 didn't have anybody signing anything in the policy.
Right.
So PSBA is recommending this as a new policy.
This sounds really strange. I hadn't read this before. This doesn't sound measurable. It doesn't sound
Well,
enforceable.
like I said, there's wording in the old one that I want to keep.
Yeah,
I want to keep that we are to seek community input,
sure.
stakeholder input. because I think that should be left in there. A lot of what's in the old one is in the new one, it's reworded. And that's
Yeah,
gonna
right.
take some time.
Right here, it has about community support by seeking input.
Community clearly?
But that's the old one.
No,
No, this is the new one.
Oh, all right, then I printed out the wrong one.
no, you didn't. Barb, you didn't. It's in both.
Yes.
Okay,
The key here is that reviewing it and whether or not you're gonna adopt the PSBA's version of this is important, because you're the
well, I have
local
no
law.
issue necessarily with the PSBA version, but I want to customize it
Right.
to our own issues that we've seen in the past to make sure that we're clear, if not for us per se, for future boards.
What specifically do you want to add, Barb?
I don't know, I haven't had time because this all came out yesterday.
Maybe we just champion public education by engaging members of local, state, and federal legislative bodies. I mean, I don't think that has any place in here. I mean, I think that as board members,
Yeah,
we need to be working here with the school.
The same with
And
903,
we
I think we
shouldn't
have
be,
to.
yeah, Barb's on.
Yeah, it's political.
It is political, and it's not our job, it's not what we.
PSBA is a lobbyist organization. They're just making their job easier.
I understand,
But
I just want the,
We could easily table whatever you do not feel comfortable with in its entirety,
yeah,
and then work out a process of how we're going to get to the end result, whether it's we sit down, whether it's whatever sits down, we'll work out a process, but you can,
yeah, this one for sure
I don't,
needs
it
work.
doesn't matter, we could table it, we could table it.
well, 903 too, we have to make sure that we're not violating anyone's First Amendment rights. Not that we did that here,
Mhm.
you know what
Is that
I
the
mean?
one
But
where there's a lawsuit?
Pensbury, yeah,
Yeah.
and Simon. So,
Oh, yeah, Simon Campbell.
So real quick, the main thing that I saw change from the old 011 to the new 011 is that they removed the ensuring strong management of school system by hiring, setting goals with evaluating, and evaluating the superintendent. So it's that consequences and the checks and balances in the system are being removed in the new system. So
Well-
whatever you adopt, please add,
I think that was put into a different one, but I'm not positive. And
I couldn't
that's,
find it.
I haven't had time to do the deep dive research into it.
And then it also says the champion of public education by engaging members of the local, state, and federal legislative bodies, like you were saying.
Yeah,
The reality is, one of the biggest shortfalls of our district was its inability to email both sections of the stakeholders. The ones that are currently accessing the schools, meaning the parents and the teachers and the students, and then the other ones that don't necessarily access the schools, except for taxpayers,
right.
business owners, and other things, so that when you as a community government that are organizing this public need something, we in the community can provide it to you without you having to tax the elderly to get it. And that's the goal of government, is to manage that process. If you guys needed something to be done and a business can do it, rather than add taxes that the lady that's making the decision between medicine and food, you're putting that burden on them. You should ask first and take volunteerism before you take taxation, which is by
Well, I
force.
think an example of that was for the FMLA,
Perfect example.
to pay for the cost for the kids to attend. Certainly,
For the what?
FBLA.
FBL, okay, you're right, FBLA.
I understood.
You're right, FMLA is different.
I speak Barb, I get
It's been
it.
a very long day. So, I mean, businesses could have been asked to contribute to that, so that even though it's not a problem for educational funds to be used for something like that, it would have removed that burden.
But the goal is that,
Is it our job as a board to solicit funds from the community? for something like that?
To coordinate them, yes, it's government.
Wow. Coordinate, solicit.
Coordinate.
Okay.
This is what the government's gonna need, this is what the government's gonna do,
And
what's
how are
available.
they going to go about soliciting?
A lot of times, the advisors in that situation would go out as the advisors, and they would help raise those funds.
Same with, they did the food drive here. So the idea is that
They
the,
normally like donate to the foundation and then the foundation could in turn put towards the school.
Well, it all depends. I mean, if you want to use the foundation money, well, then it's a different process.
Right.
With their board of directors, all that, who can control the money. There's different ways of doing it. You just have to decide which way is better for the district.
but from a 30,000-foot view, the lack of communication is the key to this puzzle. So to develop that email, robocalls, text blast, and improving the communication through the internet with the heighten.org website, those vehicles that you already have that really don't cost anything to use that much greater than what you're doing should be implemented by this government, by the community, so we can all better participate and help this
Well,
community out.
my goal here, like with that particular example, is to bring the community back together.
Yep.
To make it feel like, I don't want to say family, because sometimes families are very dysfunctional. But
That sounds
we
like.
all
Barb,
know
Barb,
that.
I think what you're aiming for is you want them to feel that they can participate.
I want them
Open.
included.
Correct. Participate.
Yeah.
And the more you get participation, it's like free consulting advice.
I mean, for one example is there was a group, and it's a relatively new group that wants to take a trip to Washington DC. They're going the third week, I think, in January. And it's a club that's in the school. They did a spaghetti dinner fundraiser, and they did really well. And the entire community came out to support them, which was great, because it's just better for the school if we get more participation from everyone in the community.
And that perfect example is where,
And they feel valued.
yeah, that organization came to us as a business as well, and other places, and we wrote the checks. So that, again, you don't want a community where grandmom has to leave because she can't afford it.
I
Because
know,
you
Dave,
can't.
I'm facing that
I
situation.
understand. But that communication's key. That's how you bring it back together. And as soon as you establish the
That's how it was
structure,
done when I was a kid.
You know, Barb, I forgot to tell you, I would like you to take the treasurer's stipend instead of donating.
No. There is no treasurer stipend anymore.
There
We got
is.
rid of it.
Did we?
Yes,
I
we
thought
got
it
rid of it.
was donated
no,
every year.
it's up to 2%. Yeah, it's up to 2% of the
Yeah, no,
total
we got
budget.
rid of it when the issues hit with the finances.
Oh.
So, no, they got rid of that a couple of years ago. And no, absolutely
I
not.
thought Nathan donated this the other year.
That
they do.
was,
They do,
They did.
yeah.
I think it stopped after Andy left.
No, it might have been in.
It's still in the school code.
It's still there.
It may be, but we're not doing it.
It's a local decision.
Right.
It's a local decision.
But the other thing that I noticed on the ones that you currently have, if you're gonna change, that's fine, but that communication is important. There's no, on this 006, they took out the consequences of all these things, and I've been on the board for 4 years, and not once did a adopting or changing of textbooks ever occur, which is kind of awkward, where the board should be involved more closely with some of those
Yeah, 'cause
decisions.
that's curriculum.
And, correct, and they should have some oversight. And then the other one on 006 is the agenda is released 3 days before the meeting, which just isn't enough time. But the director's concern is required to be 5 days before. So in the event that a director wants to do something, they might be waiting for the agenda to come out because they're not privy to what the
Now-
agenda was.
I have a
So-
question on that. My understanding is that director's concerns are only a Lee Heighton thing.
No,
I don't even know why we want to Do we need to continue to have that on here?
Yeah, it was my intention
Say
to
what?
eliminate director's concerns and have all the motions folded in together. I don't think we need to be splitting motions out.
Will directors have access to the agenda?
Yes,
Okay, that's the difference. In the
Well, we
past, the
always
reason,
released it 5 days ahead, correct?
not
At
always.
least to the directors. Didn't it always come out on Thursday?
Goes Thursday for a Monday meeting.
yeah, that's three business days.
Well, yeah, okay, business days.
Yeah, and then the weekend.
But see, unfortunately, I work weekends. Those are business
No,
days for me.
I'm the board president now, and I'm highly accessible, and I've been receiving suggestions for motions from board members, and I've been working with Janine to get them into the agenda.
Which is perfect, and to codify that, then you write it down that you or the next president or whatever happens, that's the policy, that's how the government works, that's how everybody knows, so that if we want to lobby Brian to say, hey, Brian, I know you and you're my neighbor, and you know what, I think this board should do this. He says, that's a great idea, we should get our board to discuss it, get me some information. He then funnels it up to the board, at
Yeah.
which point you then decide to put it on the agenda. In the event that you choose, Brian, we ain't dealing with that. I'm an authoritarian and I'm choosing not to. You gotta have some understanding that within a community, he should have access to add something onto the agenda.
You could bring it up in new business.
Bring up a new business or some means to which to have it, but
Because he wants a policy that covers common sense,
Yes.
because it didn't happen in the past.
no, it was worse. They had lack of policies that allowed for these things to happen without consequences,
Right?
and there was no accountability, and there was no way in which to enforce them, because it's better to have very ambiguous policies, which is what
Well-
PSBA promotes, it ambiguous.
Right, and they do promote.
Oh, the ambiguity is great.
Wait. They say that policy needs to be ambiguous, and it's the administrative regulations that need to be.
Which is way wrong. Right.
Now, let me speak. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that this is how it's, according to the PSBA, it should be done. My question is, and I think I already know the answer, PSBA also said that the board should look at the administrative regulations and make sure they follow policy. Has anybody who was on the board before ever seen any of the administrative regulations?
Nope.
Therein lies the issue. A big issue.
Yeah. It's all accountability, because once you set up the rules that everybody's gonna play by, there's not that much consternation and
There
argument.
has to be consequences and accountability. I absolutely agree.
And there's gotta be a process, it's gotta be written down, and I know common sense has to be written down a little bit, Joy, because if you and I are playing Monopoly, and we already played 2 times before, we know how you don't get your money until you get past go. And you don't take a loan from the bank. However, if somebody else shows up to the game, they might decide, well, it doesn't say that it's not in the rules, so I can do it. And that was the problem.
Sure, let's back up a little bit. So, Jack, did you, in your past life, in board agendas, have like a section on the agenda called Directors' Concerns, where board members who were not the president, if they had a motion, it would get segregated into this?
No, what we simply did, if there were concerns, those concerns were brought up 99% of the time in that workshop sessions, and then the board as a whole, most times you got 9 people there, said, yep, this is a concern, and then at that point, it was moved as an agenda item for approval. But
So quite frankly,
it was a
Dave,
different way of doing it.
yeah, I mean, quite frankly, Dave, I think that Directors' Concerns was invented 4 years ago when we got onto the board.
Yep.
And the purpose of it was to segregate motions that came from certain board members into a group so that other people knew to vote no.
Correct.
To vote no for those.
You're correct, but it is, I mean, if you go under just board docs and do a Google search, you'll see where directors' concerns are all over the state, because a lot of people wanted to use the same process to stymie that participation.
Right.
The reason you have nobody in this policy meeting is because they weren't heard, they were silenced. If you go back a couple years, this room was packed because people were listened to originally. And then they started bringing in the police to escort them out, and everybody said, look, I'm not going for that, I don't need it. And that's where
But that's what I want to
fix.
fix.
Yeah, but you lost the brain trust, and that's where the oversight was missing, and that's where someone like Dashe or her husband or even her kid or somebody else can show up and say, you know what happened to me in school? I want to have this looked at. And if they know that someone's going to be on the receiving end of that logic and reason, then it's fine.
Yeah, but as superintendent, I want that coming through me or the direct channels first.
I would agree, 100%. But the board has to set up that channel to make it go through, at which point it gets handled. In the unlikely event, I'll actually respectfully submit, in the unlikely event that they were unhappy with the consequences of whatever occurred, there has to be a secondary process
It's
to
like a
which.
grievance.
Yeah, it's exactly.
We have a grievance process in our contract.
Which is called a formal.
If the individuals that you just said have an issue, they've got to go to step number one immediately.
Agreed.
Immediate supervisor, just like if a teacher had an issue, they would go to principal first.
Right.
If it's not settled, they go to me,
Yep.
then they go to the board.
Correct. And there's a
But I don't
process.
But I don't favor people running to board members first, because 99% of the time, we could settle it, you don't have the big picture, that's what I just want to settle.
It depends on the situation. Depends on what you're talking about. If it's inside the school, that would make sense, Jack. And same with if it's outside the school, then it doesn't, it would be a board member. But the process of that complaint process, the grievance, so in the other schools, how did a grievance take place? If in the event that it was not handled by the superintendent, what was the formal written complaint process that occurred? How does it work in a good school district?
I never had an issue with a individual, whether it was a community member, a parent, a kid, whoever, bringing something to a board meeting.
But because you handled it inside of the administration.
What James asking is like, let's say a parent was dissatisfied with, their kid came home and told them a story and they weren't satisfied with something that happened at school. What would be the proper procedure for a parent to, what should they do?
Bring it to the immediate person first. One, maybe it's the teacher. Maybe the parent can call the teacher and say, what happened? Because a lot of times when it came to certain issues, the stories weren't exactly alike. So I had no problem. In fact, I promoted that the parent call the teacher first and get that firsthand information of what exactly did happen. If they're not happy, then go to the principal. And if they're not happy, then
Follow the chain of command.
Chain of command. And at the end of that chain of command, if they still were not satisfied, what is the process?
the process has to be that the final decision is hopefully, a final decision has to be made.
Right.
Let's
But
back up.
where's the grievance go?
Be more specific.
Yeah.
Are you saying if the parent is not satisfied then with what the superintendent says? Is that
Correct.
what you're saying?
Yep, it's a superintendent.
Then what shall they do?
Correct. What is the process for them to get justice under the grievance?
I just said, I had no problem that they can bring it to the board. I said that.
But what is the process for which they do to bring it to the board? What do they file a form? Do they do something?
Oh, well, we could get technical, but the bottom line is I had no problem with them calling me to get it on a board agenda or
Whatever, right.
just showing.
So the process is you have a community that currently is uneducated as to how the process is supposed to work because everything's been shoved under the rug and circled the wagons. And to fix that, if you go to the promised land and decide here's what it's supposed to be, and if you describe that to your board and they implement that and codify it in policy, we then all can follow the authority and make sure that it's done properly.
That's not, I'm not questioning that.
But that needs to be done here. It was missing.
Just to let you know, there are discussions happening, our new solicitor has told us that there's a problem with the complaint process, that
Okay.
it's broken and that it needs to be fixed, and that, there's been a lot of changes in Title IX in the last 5-10 years, and a lot of school districts aren't up to speed on that. And we're working on that. Apparently, Fox Rothschild has people in-house who train people. They are experts on this. We're talking about training and talking about getting other experts involved. And so things take time.
No, we completely agree. It's just the process, that's the goal. Set up what you're aiming for, and then you gotta find a way to get there.
Correct, and you're right, like, we've seen parents, like, let's take the night that parents came here about Mr. Buffington. Almost every child said that there was a problem with bullying and that they didn't feel like it was being properly addressed. And that sort of fits into the region of Title IX type stuff.
Sure.
And I think everybody agrees that it wasn't being approached correctly. And you know that we have a new board, we're fresh. Mr. Corby's even fresher. I mean, he just got here before Christmas, you know.
And a new solicitor that actually listens to Title IX rules and makes sure they're being complied with?
All right,
Yes, and so it's you know, it's going to take time. It needs to be
it
considered.
can't be all fixed yesterday, it just can't.
Correct. And
We have a different vision.
Right. No, I agree. That's why I thought we were going through these policies to make sure that we don't take out
Well,
all
I
those
mean,
things.
like I said, if I had been able to look over it for 2 days, you know, instead of a few hours, I would have been more prepared. But I'm not because I didn't. And
So do we?
with the
Just table
903, from what I've seen, I like what was put in there. But I literally printed it out and brought it with me. Because as soon as it was done printing, I left to come here. I have not had time to look at it. I think we should,
Should we table everything that's on the agenda and just call another special policy meeting next week? Give you time to read it more?
no.
I think
we
you
just
should go
do
to
it next
the,
month.
yeah, I think you should go to the February process
Well,
of,
I just want you to be aware that these second readings, some of them have been sitting since like August.
Which, I don't have a copy of the agenda, so I'm not sure on the second readings.
So like we have the bullying, cyberbullying, which was the new policy to replace the 249. Like these have all been sitting for quite some time.
See,
So
I'm
I don't know if you want to move forward with those.
and I didn't see any second readings on there.
Well, there's a first reading, like I think you're saying, that these were read first, and they're still before a second reading. Are you saying,
These would be moving for second reading.
oh, you mean these first, the first, how are they listed on this agenda, as a first reading or a second reading?
There's both.
Yeah,
So
but
the
see,
first
I didn't
reading-
see the second reading for it. I probably should have printed it. My printer just uses a crap ton.
but some of those policies that we're pushing through are on the,
Right. I'm not on a policy committee, but I would favor tabling it until the next month to have it be carefully considered, and then we can have.
Extracurricular
I agree, because you didn't have the ones you're trying to push through,
There's the,
you didn't have an ethical
the
committee at the
technology
time
ones that have been.
that was
sitting.
reviewing it.
Okay, and
It's a new board, and I think we
Yeah.
need time to
Then
carefully
those-
consider things.
if changes were not made,
They were not.
They weren't.
That's my whole point. Yeah, the new board has to look
I
at it.
guarantee you, they probably won't make it through.
Right, they have to be reviewed.
Changes were not made with what?
If I remember correctly, I don't remember which one, it was one of the ones for technology.
Email policy.
Yep.
Yes, the email, for deleting emails.
Yeah, when that was removed.
Okay, because I
That
haven't
was
seen that.
deleting. That's here.
But in all fairness, it should be reviewed by a real committee with a real board.
Yeah, I mean, I would request that the policy committee tables these items, and if you would please work on between now and the board meeting, adjusting the policies as required
Yeah, we
to
have to,
switch us to a workshop format.
okay.
Maybe we just need to remove out of 005 that, not all.
Well, there's more than 005. I think there's 0002, even though it doesn't mention committees specifically.
Yes, but could, you just please look at those and
Yes.
and reach out to Jeff and get his help, and let's just get that adjusted so that in February we can.
We can do a workshop meeting.
think Brian and Barb, we have to set up a time that we could sit like this, and you're the committee, and get your thoughts, and bring it back ASAP. Because you're the committee, and you gotta do the recommendations. Let us know what the changes are. It's an easy process.
Yeah, okay.
With,
Dave?
sorry, with all due respect, if you're gonna have that conversation about how you're gonna change policies so that you can make a recommendation to the board as a committee, it has to be public.
What? I'm sorry.
The meeting, if you're gonna have a group together, a committee assigned by the board to meet with the administration to decide what they're gonna recommend to the board as a whole, public access.
Well, I would check with Jeff Satanic if it's a legality or not. If he says, yes, it's a legality.
You can feel free to check with that. I'd appreciate, that would be a good idea.
Of course I would. And
Yep.
second of all, if the board says we don't care if it's a legality or not, we want to put it open, we put it open.
Correct. They have, it's the only restriction. But if you wanted to do it, if you met with Brian by himself, and then you met with Barb by himself,
No.
that's the circumventing the system that we want to avoid.
No.
Yeah, that's the way you want to avoid it, right. That's some of the things that were happening in the past that you want to avoid.
Yeah.
And it's not that big
So
a deal.
what's the charge here, guys? So be prepared to come back for the next board meeting with a recommendation of what policies need to be changed? Or do we need to do something separate with Barb and myself?
I think what we need to do is come up with some wording to change the policy to go to a workshop format. And then the rest of this stuff can be dealt with in that workshop format.
So now, I think 006, it has work sessions as well as committee meetings.
And I don't think you even necessarily need to have a meeting. I mean, I think if Barb, if you look at these policies and do an edit, you can.
Well,
email
that all has to be approved by the board. The edits have to be approved by the board.
Correct, but someone has to do the first edits.
Right,
Someone
right,
has
you're
to
right.
make the suggestion. So I'm asking, since you've had your finger on this policy stuff for quite a while, I'm asking you to kind of charge forward and do a suggested edit to the policies to switch us to the,
And we
Workshop
can, just
format.
like we did with the hazing policy, we can dispense with the first reading, go right to the second reading and adoption.
Correct.
I mean, we can adopt whatever we want at the next board meeting. If people consider this an important.
Well, there is a process for that,
There it
though.
is.
Okay.
There is a process, because we did that with the hazing policy, because it had been 3 years since it was supposed to have been changed and was not.
So our policy currently does not allow us to change the policy at the next board meeting.
It does, but there's a process to follow to do so.
It's been done, I've done it.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
just let's please.
All right, well, I will get,
Under Jeff's guidance, I've done it many times at
Yeah,
one.
correct, thank you.
And
So
Joy-
let's just do the edits and then present it to the board at the next meeting and, you know,
and it'll be in the agenda so that the community can see it.
correct. And
It'll
then
be
if,
out there.
and then if everybody is comfortable with dispensing with a first reading, a second reading, and we feel that it's important to move to the new format quickly, like I feel, then the board can pass it.
I would make it a common occurrence.
No,
Right.
this would be like a one-time
And-
thing, so that in February, we could look at these, you know, policies and document.
One
Enjoy,
thing,
enjoy the versions that you're looking to get adopted. Anybody else that already is using that format, we'll have them published, they're online, and you can look them right up on board docs for Centennial Ridge or any others that we just pulled up.
let
So-
me, just say this, given, there's a finance committee meeting next Monday night that I think we should still have.
Oh, yeah, it's going to exist until
Okay.
after the next board
Okay.
meeting, so Dasha was the same.
So the policy that you're going to collaborate on and come up with for the board meeting at the end of the month, is it for all of these, or is it just for the one about condensing and making
Yes.
Okay,
It's
I just
just-
wanted
yeah.
to clarify that.
It's just for that one policy,
that one
and then
policy,
everything
okay.
else will be dealt with at the workshop meeting
Okay,
in February.
And as I read this now, I don't even know that we have to change that. I mean, it says committees shall not include a majority of the membership of the board, but we're not gonna have any committees, we're gonna have a work group. So, I don't
Right.
And it says when specifically charged to do so by the board, committees of board members shall conduct studies, make recommendations, and act in an advisory capacity. So I don't think, you can just say we're not a board,
No more committees.
no more committees.
Well, maybe, yeah, please
Have to look
review
into
the
that.
policy
Yeah.
if.
Well, except we
Brian's
need
correct.
certain committees, like negotiating and personnel, that's,
And you could, their ad hoc committees can be created, changed, and assigned in a fixed determination date, which may be extended by the
Yeah,
president.
there
So
you
we're
go.
good there too.
Yeah, negotiations are as needed.
right.
And the
And
ad hoc
there's a
committees,
section
again,
for
are
work
public
sessions.
meetings when they meet, right? So it's no big deal.
So the official action for the minutes is,
To bring back, what is it, 006?
To change the format.
to
And
take,
change the policies to allow for a workshop.
first of all, to table all policies.
Right.
Correct.
Before we do that, can I ask a question on something?
And also make sure you just say, on the record, since we're recording it, does anyone have any comment on this official action before I take it?
Brian, would you like to comment?
Yeah, Brian's got the floor.
Thank you. Well, this is not about that. I question the moment of silence and adding that in. What is the purpose of the moment of silence?
Okay, so April Walker specifically requested, this is another one of these situations where a board member asked me for a thing. She specifically wanted to say a prayer at the beginning of the meeting. And Jeff Sultanic had told me that another school board in Pennsylvania had been sued for doing that. That there was a private group that was specifically targeting public bodies like school boards, that if they had any sort of religious content, they were specifically suing them. And Jeff said, you guys have other fish to fry here, let's not open, this other box of trouble, right?
Mhm.
And he recommended moving to a moment of silence. He said that many school districts do that, that you have the Pledge of Allegiance, you're still standing, you roll right into a moment of silence, and then anyone who wishes, for example, Ms. April Walker,
Can
can
pray.
silently say a prayer themselves. She's a religious person, and it was her wish to invoke the Maker before we have a meeting in the hopes that the board does all of the right things.
And it doesn't matter which one you believe in.
Correct, and so that
And
was
you
the,
meditate.
that was the origins of all of that.
Okay. I'm just used to a moment of silence being attached to a specific event that we're kind of doing, so I don't want it to lose.
Well, unfortunately, Brian,
It's
very
valuable.
often there's been at least one specific event
Well,
during the
yeah.
month that would benefit from a moment of silence or a prayer, or whatever anybody wants.
But no, Brian is right, usually it's a moment of silence for, the people in a particular state or country, da-da-da. But anyways, that's the history behind that.
Thank you. And then do we want to, I know we didn't really talk about this yet, but in the order of business with the reports, I would like to also include the student representative report, because I'd like to see about
Well,
getting
that's
that
something
one.
we really need to have on the next agenda, is to have a student representative.
So if we do that though, are we going to then in turn have to change this policy again to include that, or should we include that now up front?
Well, I think what we can do there is name specific reports that are going to be every month, like the superintendent, et cetera, et cetera. And we can put something in there like,
And any other.
yeah, and any other that, it,
Can contribute to.
But-
well, we can specifically say student, but first that has to be voted on, that there will be a student representative.
Or what if you do like IE, where it says superintendent, like IE, superintendent, business administration, solicitor, committees, et cetera?
Right, right. Yeah, et cetera says a lot.
Yeah?
I love et cetera.
But
This
again,
way you never have to change it
those
every
reports should
time
be
you
published
decide to-
prior to the meeting and presented to the public. Not, because we've been in here in a board meeting where the report shows up in the middle of the meeting, and we had no idea until that day what this report was gonna say.
Yeah.
Well, they
Sounds fair.
Understood, Dave, understood. Once again, things are going to take a little bit of time. We gotta make adjustments, and it'll get better every month.
Ask National Honor Society or that group to appoint both a person and an alternate, that we're always going to get a person here because kids are busy, kids are involved in different things. So if you get a representative to the board, however you want to term the person, and an alternate, there's usually good things happening. And let's promote them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've had one student who's been consistently here, and I know he's eager to be that student
Well, he's on the student
representative.
council too, so.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think with all the kind of bickering and things like that we've had on the board in the past, that was sort of the excuse or reason why we did not have a student representative to try to keep them out of the fray.
Except he was sitting here anyway.
I know, and jumping in.
Well, and you know, we didn't hold the student to the whole meeting. We allowed them at the beginning to report on the
Right.
activities, and then say, you've got homework, you know.
Yeah.
We're not gonna keep you up till 9:30 and discuss things that,
No,
quite
it's
honestly, they're
not.
not sure. Right?
Jack, that used to be the way here. We had that on, we had a PTO person on the board that would sit and give a report and a student member as well. I think that's wise.
But we always let them go, because there's,
Yeah.
They're busy.
they are.
I getcha.
They really
I
are.
have no comment on your motion.
I'm
I
sorry.
have no comment on your motion. That was my only comment on.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, it's not really a motion to table, but it is. So you can't take action.
It's up to you folks.
You can, and it is an action, so you should just do it.
Okay.
You're in a committee. You were appointed to this committee. You're a legal board of directors sitting
I
on
haven't
a
been on a
committee.
committee before, so.
Well, you are now.
Well, I was on building and grounds, but,
I really don't think you have to take, because you're not moving anything.
right, we're just gonna table this until we do the new format,
Great.
and then everything here will be taken up under the new format.
Except for the meetings, right? For the workshop session.
Well, everything will go to the workshop session.
But that policy is going to come back for January. Is that what you were saying, for approval?
Well, to set up for the workshop sessions, yes.
For the February.
That'll, right, that'll be on the agenda to basically abolish the committees and go to a workshop format.
I'd use the word consolidate.
Yeah.
Okay, well, give me,
Or give the option, say, the board has the options of appointing committees or.
right, I think it's already in the policy, but we
Yeah.
will,
It is.
Verify, yeah.
As I read them, you can do both.
Yeah, and that's probably best to leave it like that, because there's options for.
Committee in the future if we feel like it, but I think workshops make sense right now where we're at.
yes, I agree, because I think the entire board needs to be present to hear all
Yep.
and get all that.
Yep,
Mhm.
all the data.
Yeah, I would love to have heard what Sue was talking about before I got here. It sounded like it was pretty interesting stuff.
Well, I tried to
Scheduling,
get
stuff like
you.
that. I didn't even know
No.
what was going on, but I think that, to your point, is a good thing, because then you would have to come back as a committee and
Yeah,
report
how
those
do
things to
you-
the board and.
And you
you're
didn't hear
putting
the
your
entire
trust- you're
presentation.
putting your full trust, because you have to, you're saddled to vote. You
Yep.
have to vote.
Yeah,
Right,
and how do I tell you what Sue said in 1 minute that
Exactly.
she said for a half an hour?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's difficult.
Which is also why this thing's great.
Well, yeah,
The more you
yeah, I will. be
transparently
watching.
publish, the better off you are.
mhm.
say two things to keep in mind, I guess, would be time,
Mm.
because, you know, this was an hour, the academic affairs was an hour and a half. And then you have finance, which could be easily an hour.
Right.
So maybe start a little earlier than 7 for a workshop, like just with.
Well, 6:30 I can well, if it's a Monday, it's not an issue for me.
Just because the
Because I'm
time
off
being
on
hours,
Mondays.
like it might be a very long meeting.
It's gonna.
And,
But-
and
No, I'm off.
space, so if you have full members and then a bunch of administrators,
Yep,
we'll just have to
Well-
coordinate something for space and if they have
Hey, I've been
presentations
doing
and
this
stuff.
for 3
But the key to that whole process is if those presentations, if everything's already scheduled to the workshop, they can be presented prior, just like you turn in your homework early.
sure.
And they can do it so that everybody has an opportunity to see it, and then they can ask if they have any questions.
Well, the presentation should be added on the agenda.
We'll work on it. I mean,
It's a process.
It's going to be
Yeah.
a process. It's a new
I think there's a way to streamline things. Like I was saying earlier, I guess to Brian, if they're presenting information that doesn't need to be deliberated, maybe then we need to talk with the administrators about what information do they actually give to the board? Because maybe a bunch of that information the board doesn't actually need because, we don't have a decision to make on it. So I think it's more about figuring out what information the board actually needs and kind of targeting that so that we're not listening to like a 1-hour presentation, maybe it's just a 15-minute presentation on a very specific topic.
Well, I found the scheduling, I just walked in at the end of it, I found that very interesting.
Mhm.
When I went to school, we had 7 periods a day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just how it was done. I didn't even understand the concept of block scheduling.
Yeah,
But I think that it's important that the board knows that they're considering this and the reasons why,
oh
but maybe not all the other stuff, which I didn't see anyway.
yeah, right. Anyways, it's kind of, whatever.
Yeah.
In light of that, the board should be asking the right questions so that these administrators come to this meeting with the data. What is the amount of time this teacher is in front of a student? How much teacher time does this student have?
Yeah.
You don't want to have an auditorium full of, and we've had this discussion many times over the last couple of years, but actionable items presented would be the idea.
Yeah, exactly, actionable items.
Right, because they always just sing the story, but then no changes ever take place and the students are still stuck.
Yeah, agreed. We'll work on the format. I think this is the first step and then it'll get cultivated and evolve over time.
It's a process. There's new board members, it's new.
It's new, yes, it's very new. Yeah, and I've been sitting here for over 3 years, but it's still new.
We're going to a new process with new people. It's a process.
Anybody else have anything they want to say? Then I motion that we adjourn.
Thank you for volunteering.
Motion and a second.